At breakfast, my daughter smiled. "I've got a surprise for you." She passed me an envelope. Inside was her husband's $400,000 debt. He demanded, "It's due Monday." I refused. She hurled hot coffee at me. Her husband shouted, "Leave now." An hour later, the police showed up. Can you imagine looking into the eyes of your own daughter, the one you raised, loved, and sacrificed everything for, only to realize she's planning to destroy you? My own flesh and blood didn't just try to steal my life savings. She tried to burn me out of my home with scalding hot coffee. And that was only the beginning of a revenge that would absolutely shatter their lives forever. It started like any other crisp October morning in Chicago. The light filtering through my kitchen windows, steam rising from my coffee, the Tribune spread out on the table. My routine was my sanctuary, especially after everything. Then, Emily's voice, sharp and bright like she wanted something, cut through the quiet. "Daddy, I have a surprise for you." She stood there, clutching a manila envelope like a shield, a wide smile on her face that didn't quite reach her eyes. Behind her, Mark, my son-in-law, leaned against the counter, casual as if he owned the place. This was my house, my morning, and they were interrupting. "What kind of surprise?" I folded my paper, setting it beside my half-eaten toast, trying to buy myself time to read their faces. Emily's laugh sounded forced, almost brittle. "Just open it, you'll see." She thrust the envelope at me, her fingers trembling. My eyes caught the return address, a law firm downtown I'd never heard of. And then the weight of it, thick with documents that rustled with a sinister whisper as I turned it over. "Go ahead, Jesse." Mark's voice was too quiet, too calm, like a blade sliding out of its sheath. "We've been waiting to share this with you." The envelope tore easily. Papers spilled onto my breakfast table, official letterhead, columns of numbers, signatures I didn't recognize. My heart started to hammer. My eyes darted from page to page, trying to make sense of the chaos. Credit card statements, loan documents, casino receipts, all bearing my name, all showing balances that made my chest tighten with a cold dread. "What the hell is this?" The words came out sharper than I intended, but my coffee cup was shaking, so I set it down hard before I could spill it. "Those are your debts, Daddy." Emily's artificial sweetness had vanished, replaced by a chilling flatness. "We found them in your papers when we were helping you organize last month." "Remember?" I didn't remember. I remember them coming over, claiming they wanted to help me get organized, rummaging through my desk drawers and filing cabinets while I made them lunch. But I sure as hell didn't remember signing up for $400,000 in gambling debts. "I've never been to a casino in my life," I retorted, spreading the papers wider, scanning dates and locations. Las Vegas, Atlantic City, riverboat casinos downstate, places I'd never even heard of, let alone visited. Mark stepped closer, his presence suddenly massive, intimidating in my own kitchen. "Memory isn't what it used to be, is it, Jesse?" He picked up a statement. "Those signatures look pretty authentic to me." The handwriting did look like mine. Too much like mine. I picked up one of the credit card statements, holding it closer. The signature at the bottom was perfect. Every loop and curve, exactly as I would have written it. My stomach dropped. "These need to be paid by Monday," Mark said, his voice now flat, businesslike. "Otherwise, we'll all lose everything. The house, the cars, everything. Monday." Today was Monday. Emily moved to stand beside her husband, a united front, absolutely clear now. "We can't let that happen, Daddy. We've got nowhere else to go." I looked up at my daughter, 35 years old, standing in my kitchen with tears starting to gather in her eyes, holding documents that would destroy everything I'd worked for. The same daughter I'd raised alone after her mother died, put through college, helped with her wedding, supported through Mark's endless career failures. The same daughter who was looking at me now like I was the problem. "I didn't sign these." My voice came out quieter but steady. "Someone forged my name." "Who would do that?" Emily's tears started falling, perfectly on cue. "Who else has access to your personal information? Who else knows your social security number? Your mother's maiden name? All those security questions." The implication hung in the air between us like smoke. Mark shifted his weight, and I caught a flicker of satisfaction in his eyes before he looked away. "We need to figure this out together, as a family," Emily continued, reaching across the table to touch my hand. "But first, we need to pay these debts before they come after the house." I pulled my hand away from hers like she was poison. I stood up slowly, my joints protesting, but my resolve hardening. The papers scattered as I pushed back from the table, creating a mess of false promises and forged signatures across the surface where I'd eaten breakfast every morning for 30 years. "This isn't over," I said, looking from Emily to Mark and back again. "Not by a long shot." Emily's tears came faster now, streaming down her cheeks. Daddy, please. We're family. How can you even question this? She moved around the table toward me, her hands outstretched, like I was a wounded animal she was trying to calm. Think about everything we've been through together. Mom's funeral, my wedding, all those times you said family comes first. Family doesn't forge signatures, I said, my voice rock solid, keeping the table between us. Family doesn't create fake debts. Mark pushed off the counter, stepping closer until he was blocking the kitchen doorway. Now hold on there, Jessie. Those documents are legal and binding. Your signature, your social security number, your responsibility. The laugh that escaped me held no humor, just bitter disbelief. My responsibility? I've never gambled a day in my life. Ask anyone who knows me. People change. Emily wiped her nose with the back of her hand, a gesture that reminded me painfully of when she was 7 and had scraped her knee. Maybe you forgot. Maybe the stress of living alone, managing everything by yourself. I'm not senile. The words came out harder than I intended, but something about her tone, that carefully modulated sympathy, made my skin crawl. Mark took another step forward. Look around, old man. You think you can handle this place forever? The yard work, the maintenance, keeping track of bills and paperwork. I keep track just fine. Do you? Emily's voice took on a sharper edge. Because we found these documents mixed in with your insurance papers, your tax returns. If you were really on top of things, wouldn't you have noticed $400,000 in debt? She had a point, and she knew it. The papers had been in my desk drawer, filed neatly between my homeowner's policy and last year's 1040. Someone had put them there deliberately, mixed them in so perfectly that even I might have overlooked them during a casual search. A cold suspicion began to solidify in my gut. We're trying to help you, Mark said, his voice taking on that reasonable tone people use when explaining something to a child. Emily and I talked about this for weeks before bringing it to you. We could have just let the collectors come, let them take the house, but we wanted to give you a chance to make this right. Make what right? I didn't do anything wrong. Then why are your signatures on every document? Emily pulled one of the credit card statements from the pile, holding it up like evidence in a courtroom. Look at this handwriting, Daddy. Look at it carefully. I looked. The signature was mine. Not just similar, but perfect in every detail. The way I dotted my I's, the slight upward slant of my letters, even the way the pen had caught slightly on the paper where I always pressed too hard. Anyone can learn to copy a signature, I said, but my voice lacked conviction. In 37 different places, Mark pulled out another sheet of papers. Credit applications, loan documents, casino markers, all signed over the past 6 months. You think someone followed you around for half a year, forging your name on gambling debts? Emily moved closer, her tears replaced by something harder, colder. We're not asking you to admit anything. We're asking you to take responsibility. These debts exist. They're in your name. If they don't get paid, we all lose everything. I looked around my kitchen, my coffee pot, my dishes in the sink, my calendar on the refrigerator with my handwriting, marking doctor's appointments and grocery lists. This is my house. Technically, yes. Mark smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. But Emily's been helping with the expenses for months. The property taxes last spring, remember? The new roof in August. She's got receipts for all of it. I did remember. Emily had insisted on helping when I mentioned the tax bill. Said it was the least she could do after everything I'd given her. The roof repair had been her idea, too, claiming she was worried about me living under leaky shingles. Besides, Emily added, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper, where are we supposed to go if they take the house? Mark's been out of work for 3 months. We've been staying here because we literally have nowhere else. That was news to me. They've been visiting more often lately, sure, but I thought it was just Emily wanting to spend time with her old man. I hadn't realized they'd been staying here out of necessity rather than choice. If you don't pay these debts, Mark continued, his voice chillingly calm, the creditors will go after any assets they can find. The house, the cars, even Emily's jewelry. Everything will be gone. And then what? We'll be living in some shelter downtown while lawyers divide up what's left. Emily sank into one of the kitchen chairs, burying her face in her hands. I can't believe this is happening. I thought we could handle it as a family, work something out together. But if you're going to deny responsibility for your own actions, they're not my actions. But even as I said it, a sliver of doubt, an insidious seed of confusion, crept into my voice. The signatures were too perfect, too consistent across so many documents. And Emily was right about one thing. If someone had been forging my name, why would they create gambling debts? Why not something more profitable like bank loans or investment accounts? We need a solution, Mark said, his tone businesslike again. Today, before the creditors start calling. Emily's chair scraped against the linoleum as she stood up abruptly, her face transforming from tearful desperation to something I'd never seen before. Cold, calculating rage. You know what? I'm done with this. Her voice cracked like a whip. We've tried being reasonable. We've tried explaining. But you're too selfish to care about anyone but yourself. She moved toward the coffee pot, her movements sharp and jerky. 35 years I've been your daughter. 35 years of putting up with your stubborn, self-righteous attitude. Emily, calm down, I said, taking a step back. Something in her posture, the way her shoulders were coiled, made me instinctively wary. Calm down. She spun around, the coffee pot in her hands, steam rising from the glass carafe. My husband can't find work. We're about to lose everything. And you're sitting there acting like none of this is your fault. The coffee was still hot. I could see it steaming, could almost feel the heat radiating from the pot as she held it at chest level. Her knuckles were white around the handle. I raised you better than this, I said quietly, the words feeling heavy and hollow. You raised me to clean up your messes. The words exploded out of her, and suddenly, the coffee pot was moving, arcing through the air in a perfect trajectory toward my chest. I saw it coming but couldn't move fast enough. The scalding liquid hit me like liquid fire, soaking through my flannel shirt and undershirt in seconds. The heat seared my skin, and I gasped, stumbling backward as the coffee dripped down my torso. Jesus, Emily! The pain was immediate and overwhelming, like someone had pressed a hot iron against my ribs. I pulled the wet fabric away from my skin, but the damage was done. She stood there, holding the empty pot, her chest heaving, looking as shocked as I felt. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then Mark stepped forward, and his expression wasn't shocked at all. It was satisfied. Get out, old man! His voice was calm, almost conversational. This is our house now. Pack whatever you can carry and get out. This is my house. I kept my voice steady despite the burning sensation spreading across my chest. I'm the one on the deed. I'm the one who's been paying the mortgage for 30 years. Not anymore. Mark moved closer, close enough that I could smell the cigarettes on his breath. Those debt papers change everything. By tomorrow, the creditors will have liens on this property, but Emily and I can work something out with them. We've got nothing to lose. I looked at my daughter, still clutching the empty coffee pot. The woman who used to curl up next to me on the couch to watch cartoons, the girl I'd taught to ride a bike in the driveway outside, the young woman I'd walked down the aisle just 3 years ago. She wouldn't meet my eyes. You planned this. The realization hit me, like cold water after the burning coffee. Both of you. The documents, the timing, everything. We planned to solve a problem, Mark said, a smug look spreading across his face. Your problem. The problem you created with your gambling and your debts, and your refusal to take responsibility. The wet shirt was sticking to my skin now, and I needed to get it off before the burns got worse. But more than that, I needed to get away from these people who looked like my family but acted like strangers. I needed to change clothes. I started toward the hallway, but Mark shifted to block my path. 5 minutes, he said. Pack light. We'll send your stuff later if we feel like it. I looked him straight in the eye. This man I'd welcomed into my home, fed at my table, tried to help find work when he kept losing jobs. Move! Something in my tone must have convinced him I wasn't going to back down because he stepped aside. But I could feel him watching as I walked toward my bedroom, could feel Emily's eyes following me too. The hallway felt longer than usual, and each step sent fresh waves of pain across my burned chest. Behind me, I heard low voices, Mark and Emily conferring in urgent whispers. Their next move, probably, dividing up my belongings like I was already dead. My bedroom door closed with a soft click. And for the first time all morning, I was alone. I peeled off the coffee-soaked shirt carefully, wincing as the fabric pulled away from my skin. The burns weren't too deep, but they covered most of my chest and upper abdomen in angry red patches. In the mirror above my dresser, I looked like what I was, a 65-year-old man who'd just been betrayed by the people he trusted most. But my eyes were clear, and my hands were steady as I reached for a clean shirt. They wanted me out of my own house. They wanted me to disappear quietly while they took everything I'd worked for. They had no idea what they had just started. Clean shirt first. The white cotton felt cool against my burned skin as I buttoned it carefully, avoiding the tender spots where Emily's coffee had done its work. My hands moved with practiced efficiency, despite the tremor of anger running through them. 30 years of getting dressed for work every morning had ingrained the routine deep in my muscle memory. The suitcase came down from the closet shelf with a thud that seemed too loud in the quiet bedroom. I could still hear their voices from the kitchen, lower now but urgent. Planning. Into the suitcase went 3 days' worth of clothes, my prescription bottles from the bathroom, and the manila folder I kept in my desk drawer, the important papers I hadn't found yet, property deed, insurance documents, birth certificate, the will I'd written after Emily's wedding. Everything that proved this house belonged to me, not them. My wallet held $200 in cash, not much, but enough to get by until I figured out what came next. The car keys jingled softly as I slipped them into my pocket alongside my phone. 10 minutes. That's all the time I allowed myself before closing the suitcase and heading for the back door. I couldn't risk another confrontation in the hallway. Not when Mark might decide words weren't enough anymore. The October morning air cut through my shirt like a blade, sharp and clean after the suffocating atmosphere inside. My burned chest protested the cold, but I kept walking, across the backyard toward the fence line that separated my property from Robert's. Robert Hayes had lived next door for 15 years, ever since his retirement from teaching high school history. We'd shared plenty of conversations over that fence about the Cubs, about the weather, about the steady decline of the neighborhood. But I'd never imposed on him before, never shown up at his door looking like a refugee from my own life. His kitchen light was on. I could see him through the window, reading what looked like a newspaper while holding a coffee mug. Normal morning routine, the kind I'd been enjoying myself less than an hour ago. I knocked on his back door, trying to make it sound casual rather than desperate. Robert opened it, wearing a blue terry cloth robe and an expression of concern that deepened when he got a good look at my face. "Jessie, what happened? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Worse than that." I shifted the suitcase to my other hand, feeling the weight of everything I'd managed to grab. "I need to ask a favor if you don't mind. Could I come in for a few minutes?" He stepped back immediately, waving me inside with the same hospitality he'd shown whenever I'd stopped by to borrow a tool or return a borrowed book. His kitchen was warm and smelled like bacon. The kind of comfortable morning atmosphere I'd lost somewhere between Emily's envelope and her coffee assault. Sit down, sit down." He gestured toward the small table by his window. "You want some coffee? Something to eat? Coffee would be good." I set the suitcase beside my chair and eased myself down, trying not to wince as the burns pulled against my shirt. "I've got a story to tell you, Robert. Not a good one." He poured coffee into a mug decorated with a faded Chicago Bears logo and set it in front of me before taking the opposite chair. "I'm listening. Where to start? With this morning's betrayal, or with the pattern I should have seen coming years ago?" 4 years ago, I began, the words feeling strange in my mouth, like admitting to a crime I hadn't realized I was committing. I took in Emily and Mark when they said they needed help getting back on their feet. Biggest mistake I ever made. Robert's eyebrows rose slightly, but he didn't interrupt. Good teacher habit, probably. Let the student tell the story at their own pace. I thought I was helping family. I took a sip of the coffee, grateful for the warmth spreading through my chest. Turns out I was enabling 2 people who saw me as nothing more than a walking bank account. Robert leaned forward in his chair, coffee forgotten. "What kind of help are we talking about?" It started small. Emily called. Said Mark had lost another job. They couldn't make rent. Could they stay in my spare room for a month, just until he found something new? I stared into my coffee, seeing the reflection of my own stupidity. 1 month turned into 6. 6 months turned into 4 years. And Mark never found work. Oh, he found it. Lost it, too. 3 different jobs in the first year alone. Always someone else's fault. Always some boss who didn't appreciate his talents. I could feel the old frustration building again, the memory of countless dinner conversations where I'd listened to Mark's excuses. But that wasn't the real problem. Robert waited, letting the silence stretch until I was ready to continue. The real problem started in my garage. I set down my coffee mug harder than necessary. I had my tools organized the way I'd kept them for 30 years. Everything in its place, everything labeled. Mark decided that was inefficient. Came home one day to find he'd rearranged everything. When I asked him about it, you know what he said? "What? This is our garage now, Jessie. We're all family here." The word still stung, even 4 years later. Our garage in my house with my tools that I'd collected over 3 decades of working. Robert's face darkened. He actually said that. Said it like he was doing me a favor, like I should be grateful he was taking charge of my own property. I stood up, pacing to the window that looked out toward my backyard. That should have been my first warning. But Emily defended him. Said he was just trying to help. Trying to make things more organized. How did Emily react when you objected? The question hit harder than I expected. She didn't react. That was the problem. Her husband moves into my house, starts rearranging my possessions, claims ownership of my space, and she acted like that was normal, like I was being unreasonable for wanting some boundaries. Through the window, I could see movement in my kitchen. Shadows passing back and forth behind the curtains. They were still there, still making themselves at home in the house they just tried to steal from me. It got worse from there. I turned back to Robert, who was watching me, with the focused attention he'd probably given to his students when they were struggling with a difficult concept. Mark started treating the whole house like his personal domain. Ate my food without asking, used my car when his broke down, invited his friends over for poker games that lasted until 3 a.m. And Emily, the old anger was surfacing now, for years of suppressed frustration, finally finding an outlet. Emily made excuses, always made excuses. When I complained about the noise, she said I was being too sensitive. When I objected to his friends drinking my beer, she said I was being selfish. When he started bringing home stray dogs without asking, she said I was being heartless. Robert shook his head, slowly. This went on for 4 years. It escalated. The boundary violations got bigger, bolder. I returned to my chair, suddenly feeling exhausted by the weight of my own naivete. Last year, Mark convinced me to invest in some business opportunity, a food truck franchise that was supposedly guaranteed to turn a profit. How much? $15,000. My entire savings account. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Guess what happened to that food truck? It never existed? Oh, it existed. Mark bought it, all right. When I confronted him about it, he said the business model was flawed and he was protecting me from further losses. Robert's coffee mug hit the table with a sharp click. He stole $15,000 from you and called it protection? Emily backed him up, said he'd made the best decision he could under difficult circumstances. Said I should be grateful he'd limited my losses. The memory of that conversation still made my chest tight with rage. Grateful for being robbed by my own son-in-law. Why didn't you throw them out then? The question I'd been asking myself for the past hour. Because Emily's my daughter. Because I kept thinking this was temporary, that Mark would eventually get his act together. Because every time I tried to set boundaries, Emily would cry and talk about family loyalty and how much they needed me. Robert stood up and refilled both our coffee mugs, giving me time to collect myself. This morning was different, though. This morning, they showed me documents claiming I owe $400,000 in gambling debts. Debts I never incurred, with my signature forged on every page. $400,000? Robert's voice rose with disbelief, complete with payment schedules and collection notices, all very official looking. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the photos I'd taken of the documents before leaving. Look at the signature. Tell me that doesn't look exactly like my handwriting. Robert studied the screen, his expression growing grim with each swipe. This is fraud. Criminal fraud. That's what I told them. You know what Emily did when I refused to pay. He looked up from my phone, waiting. She threw a pot of hot coffee at me. Robert's face went pale as he looked at the reddened skin visible above my shirt collar. She actually burned you. Emily's not the same person anymore. Or maybe she never was the person I thought she was. I unbuttoned the top of my shirt to show him the extent of the damage. But that's not even the worst part. You want to know where those debts really came from? He nodded grimly. Mark's got a gambling problem that makes my alleged addiction look like pocket change. Online poker, sports betting, casino trips to Indiana and Iowa. I scrolled through more photos on my phone, screenshots I'd managed to take of betting sites that had been left open on my computer. He's been using my internet, my credit cards, even my social security number to create accounts. How do you know all this? Because he got sloppy. Started leaving browser windows open. Forgot to log out of accounts. I found betting histories going back 2 years. Thousands of dollars in losses every month. I showed Robert the screen captures. Look at these transaction amounts. $500 here, $800 there, building up to $3,000 and $4,000 bets on football games. Robert studied the images, shaking his head in disbelief. This is massive fraud. It gets worse. When the gambling sites cut him off for exceeding credit limits, he moved to loan sharks. Found text messages on his phone about money owed to people with names like Fat Tony and Iceman Mike. I swiped to another screenshot. These aren't bank representatives, Robert. These are dangerous people. How much does he actually owe? Near as I can figure, about $300,000 in legitimate gambling debts. Another $100,000 in interest and penalties. I put my phone away, the number still making my head spin. But here's the kicker. He's been arrested. Arrested last year for writing fraudulent checks. Got out on bail. Trial scheduled for next month. I leaned back in my chair, finally able to say out loud what I'd been piecing together all morning. Emily knew. She knew about the gambling, the arrest, the fake documents. This whole thing was planned to make me responsible for his debts before the trial starts. Robert's hands clenched into fists on the table. That's why they needed you out of the house today. Once you're gone, they can claim residency and force the creditors to negotiate with them instead of coming after you directly. Exactly. And Emily's name isn't on any of the debt papers. So legally, she's clean. Mark takes the fall for the gambling, goes to prison, and she inherits a house she never worked for. I could see the whole scheme clearly now, laid out like a blueprint for betrayal. They've been playing this game for 4 years, setting me up piece by piece. The boundary violations, the financial manipulation, the isolation from other family members. Robert was putting it together, too, his teacher's mind connecting the dots. They've been grooming you to be the perfect victim. And I let them do it, made excuses for their behavior, rationalized their demands, convinced myself it was normal family conflict. I stared out the window toward my house, where the shadows were still moving behind the curtains. I enabled my own destruction. Robert stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the linoleum. This has gone far enough. We need to call the police. Police! The suggestion caught me off guard, even though it should have been obvious. I don't know if I'm ready for that. Ready! Robert's voice carried the sharp edge of a man who'd spent 30 years dealing with teenage nonsense and new manipulation when he saw it. Jesse, they've committed identity theft, fraud, assault, and attempted extortion. Your daughter threw scalding coffee at you this morning. What exactly are you waiting to be ready for? I looked down at my hands, seeing the slight tremor that had been there since Emily's explosion. Part of me still wanted to believe this was all some terrible misunderstanding, that my daughter couldn't really be capable of such calculated cruelty. She's still my daughter. No. Robert's voice was firm, but not unkind. Your daughter died sometime in the last 4 years. The woman living in your house is a criminal who happens to share your DNA. He moved to. The phone mounted on his kitchen wall, an old-fashioned landline that probably hadn't been used for anything but telemarketers in years. We're calling 911 right now before they have time to destroy evidence or disappear with whatever else they can steal. I wanted to argue, wanted to find some reason to delay, to avoid the final acknowledgement that my family had become my enemy. But Robert was right. The Jesse Fisher who'd raised Emily with love and patience was gone, destroyed as thoroughly as if Mark had thrown that coffee himself. Make the call. Robert's hand slammed down on the kitchen table, making both coffee mugs jump. This is criminal behavior, Jesse, not family drama. Crimes. Multiple felonies. I stared at the phone mounted on his wall, that old-fashioned landline with its coiled cord and rotary-style handset. Such a simple device to represent such a massive decision. I know you're right. My voice came out quieter than I intended. It's just, she's still my daughter. No. Robert stood up, his teacher's authority filling the room. Your daughter wouldn't throw scalding coffee at her father. Your daughter wouldn't forge legal documents to steal your house. The woman in your kitchen right now is a criminal who happens to share your DNA. He moved to the phone, lifting the handset and holding it out toward me. They assaulted you in your own home. They've committed fraud, identity theft, extortion. If you don't call the police right now, they'll destroy whatever evidence is left and disappear with everything they can carry. The handset felt heavier than it should have when I took it from his hand. What if Emily goes to jail? What if she kills you next time? Robert's voice cut through my hesitation like a scalpel. Because there will be a next time, Jesse. People like this don't stop escalating until someone stops them. I looked down at the burn marks visible above my shirt collar, the red patches where my daughter's coffee had seared my skin. The pain was still there, a constant reminder of how completely I'd misjudged the people I trusted most. You're right. I lifted the handset to my ear and dialed 911. 2 rings, then a calm, professional voice. 911, what's your emergency? I need to report a domestic assault. The words felt strange coming out of my mouth, but they were accurate. I was attacked in my own home this morning. Are you injured, sir? Yes. Coffee burns on my chest and neck. The perpetrator threw hot coffee at me during an argument. Are you in a safe location now? Yes, I'm at my neighbor's house. I gave her Robert's address, my voice growing steadier with each factual detail. Can you tell me about the person who attacked you? My daughter, Emily Thompson. She and her husband have been living in my house. They presented me with fraudulent debt documents this morning, demanding I pay $400,000 in gambling debts I never incurred. The dispatcher's tone remained professionally neutral. When I refused to pay, she became violent. Her husband threatened me as well, demanded I leave my own property. Are the perpetrators still at your residence? Yes, both of them. Emily Thompson and Mark Thompson. I spelled their names carefully, giving their approximate ages and descriptions. Officers are being dispatched to your location. Can you remain where you are until they arrive? Yes. Estimated response time is 15 to 20 minutes. Do you need medical attention for your injuries? I touched the tender skin at my throat. I don't think so. The burns aren't severe enough for the hospital. An officer will assess your injuries when they arrive. Please remain on the line while I gather additional information. She asked about weapons in the house, about any history of violence, about whether Emily and Mark might flee if they saw police approaching. I answered each question as factually as possible, feeling Robert's encouraging presence beside me. When the call ended, I set the handset back in its cradle with hands that were steadier than they'd been all morning. How do you feel? Robert asked. Like I just crossed a bridge I can never uncross. I looked toward the window that faced my house, where the people who used to be my family were probably still making themselves comfortable in rooms they'd stolen from me. But it was the right thing to do. Robert nodded approvingly. 20 minutes. Think they'll try to run? No. I was certain about this at least. They still think they've won. They think I'm too weak to fight back. They're about to learn otherwise. Let me show you where you'll be staying. Robert led me down the hallway to a small guest room that smelled like lavender and old books. Make yourself comfortable. We've got time before the officers arrive. The room was simple but welcoming. A single bed with a blue quilt, a nightstand with a reading lamp, a small dresser with an attached mirror. Nothing fancy, but clean and peaceful in a way my own house hadn't been for years. I set my suitcase on the bed and began unpacking methodically. 3 shirts, underwear, socks, my prescription bottles for blood pressure and cholesterol. The mundane ritual of organizing my belongings helped steady my nerves after the intensity of the phone call. You take your time. Robert appeared in the doorway with a fresh cup of tea. Chamomile, good for the nerves. I accepted the mug gratefully, noting the irony. A few hours ago, a hot beverage had been used as a weapon against me. Now, it represented comfort and hospitality. Robert, I need to ask you something. I sat on the edge of the bed, testing its firmness. Do you know anything about lawyers? I'm going to need legal representation. He settled into a small chair by the window, his expression thoughtful. I know a few attorneys from my teaching days. Parents who practice law, former students who went into legal careers. What kind of representation are you thinking? Property law, for starters. I need to make sure Emily and Mark can't claim any legal right to my house. I sipped the tea, feeling its warmth spread through my chest, where the coffee burn still ached. And probably family law. I don't know what happens legally when your daughter commits assault and fraud against you. There's also the criminal aspect. The prosecutor will handle that side, but you might want your own attorney to protect your interests. Robert pulled out his phone, scrolling through contacts. Let me make some calls after the police leave. I know someone who specializes in elder abuse cases. Elder abuse. The term hit me like a slap. Is that what this is? Financial exploitation of a senior citizen by family members. Physical assault. Yes, Jesse. That's exactly what this is. His voice was gentle but firm. And there are specific laws designed to protect people in your situation. I set down the tea and walked to the window, looking across the yard toward my house. The kitchen curtains were closed now, blocking my view of whatever Emily and Mark were doing inside. Probably destroying evidence, if they had any sense. How long do you think this will take? The legal process, I mean. Robert checked his watch. Depends on what they find when they search the house. Whether Emily and Mark have lawyers, if they try to fight the charges or plea bargain. He paused. Considering. Could be months, maybe longer if it goes to trial. And in the meantime, you stay here as long as you need to. I've got the space, and frankly, I could use the company. He smiled, but his eyes were serious. Besides, someone needs to make sure you're safe while this plays out. The grandfather clock in Robert's living room chimed 9 times, and I realized we'd been talking for nearly 20 minutes. Any moment now, police officers would arrive to arrest my daughter and her husband. Are you ready for this? Robert asked, as if reading my thoughts. I thought about Emily as a little girl, climbing into my lap to hear bedtime stories. Then I thought about her this morning, throwing coffee with the calculated precision of someone who meant to cause maximum pain. No, I said honestly, but I'm going to do it anyway. Through the window, I caught sight of a black and white patrol car turning onto our street, moving slowly as the officer checked house numbers. They're here. Robert stood up, straightening his shirt like he was preparing for an important meeting. Let's go get justice. The patrol car pulled into Robert's driveway with practiced quiet, followed by a second squad car that positioned itself strategically at the curb. 2 officers emerged, a tall woman with gray-streaked hair and a younger man who moved with the controlled alertness of someone trained for trouble. I met them at Robert's front door, my hand steady now that the moment had finally arrived. Mr. Fisher, the female officer extended her hand. I'm Officer Martinez. This is Officer Chin. We're responding to your domestic assault call. Thank you for coming. I shook their hands, noting how Martinez's eyes immediately went to the visible burn marks on my neck. Can we see your injuries, sir? I unbuttoned my shirt enough to show the coffee burns across my chest. Officer Chin took photos while Martinez asked questions about the incident timeline, the relationship between the parties involved, and whether I felt safe returning to my property. I'll need you to walk us through what happened this morning, Martinez said, pulling out a notebook. Start from the beginning. I gave them the facts chronologically. Emily's arrival with the fraudulent documents, the escalating argument, Mark's threats, and, finally, Emily's assault with the coffee pot. I kept my voice steady and factual, letting the events speak for themselves. Do you have the documents they showed you? Officer Chin asked. They're still in my house. I was forced to leave them behind when I fled here. Martinez and Chin exchanged a look that suggested they'd handled similar cases before. We'll need to interview the other parties and secure any evidence, Martinez explained. Would you be willing to accompany us to your residence to point out the documents and provide access? Of course. The walk across the yard felt longer than usual, with Robert beside me and 2 police officers flanking us like an honor guard. My house looked different somehow, smaller, less welcoming, as if Emily and Mark's presence had infected the very structure. Officer Chin knocked on the front door with authority. Police, open up. I heard scrambling inside, hushed voices. Then Emily's voice calling out, just a minute. When the door opened, Emily's face went pale at the sight of the officers. Behind her, Mark appeared in the hallway, his expression shifting from surprise to calculation in seconds. Emily Thompson. Officer Martinez stepped forward. We need to speak with you about an incident that occurred here this morning. I don't know what you're talking about. Emily's voice was higher than normal, strained with the effort of maintaining innocence. We have a complaint of domestic assault. Chin moved to separate the parties, gesturing for Mark to step outside. We'll need to interview you separately. I watched from the front lawn as the officers took control of the situation with professional efficiency. Emily was led to the living room, while Mark was positioned near the squad car. Both of them clearly rattled by the sudden appearance of law enforcement. 20 minutes later, after examining the scattered debt documents on my kitchen table and photographing the coffee stains on the floor, Martinez returned to where I waited with Robert. Mr. Fisher, based on the physical evidence and the statements we've gathered, we have probable cause to make arrests. I watched through the living room window as Officer Chin spoke into his radio, calling for backup in a transport vehicle. Emily Thompson, you're under arrest for domestic battery. Martinez's voice carried across the yard as she read Emily her rights. You have the right to remain silent. Emily's protests echoed from inside the house. It was an accident. I didn't mean to hurt him. But Mark's reaction was different. As Officer Chin placed him in handcuffs, his face twisted with rage. This is harassment. The old man brought this on himself. Even facing arrest, he couldn't take responsibility. Even caught red-handed with forged documents and a victim with visible injuries, he blamed everyone but himself. The transport van arrived within minutes, and I stood beside Robert, watching as Emily and Mark were loaded into separate vehicles. Emily was crying now, her mascara running in dark streaks down her cheeks. Mark continued arguing with the officers until the van door closed, cutting off his protests. Officer Martinez handed me a case number and contact information for the prosecutor's office. Someone will be in touch about pressing charges and scheduling court appearances. As the police cars pulled away, taking my daughter and son-in-law to jail, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. Not satisfaction, not victory, but simple relief that the lies were finally over. Come on, Robert said quietly, putting a hand on my shoulder. Let's go home. 3 weeks later, I was reading the Tribune's local section when Robert knocked on my front door, holding the manila envelope and wearing the expression of someone who'd discovered something interesting. You might want to see this, he said, settling into my kitchen chair, the same spot where Emily had ambushed me with her forged documents. I've been keeping track of court filings just to make sure we're protected. The envelope contained photocopies of legal documents bearing Mark Thompson's name in bold letters across the top, bankruptcy petition, multiple creditor lawsuits, probation violation hearing, employment termination notice. How did you get all this? Public records, Robert explained, spreading the papers across my table like a dealer laying out cards. Court clerk's office, bankruptcy court, county records. It's all available if you know where to look. I scanned the bankruptcy filing first. Chapter 7. Complete liquidation of assets. The man who tried to steal my house was now begging a federal judge to wipe away $300,000 in gambling debts. Look at this one. Robert pointed to a letter from something called Midwest Credit Recovery. His car got repossessed 2 days after the arrest. Couldn't make the payments without Emily's income. The employment termination letter was particularly satisfying. Mark's construction company had fired him immediately upon learning of his domestic violence arrest. Standard policy for anyone charged with violent crimes, according to the terse language of the dismissal notice. Where is he living now? I asked, though I suspected I already knew. Salvation Army's shelter on Harrison Street. Robert pulled out another document. A change of address form filed with the court. Emily filed for divorce while she was still in jail. Froze their joint bank account. What little was left in it. I studied the divorce papers, noting Emily's signature from the Cook County lockup. Even facing criminal charges herself, she'd moved quickly to cut ties with Mark's financial catastrophe. The IRS is auditing him, too. Robert continued, flipping to another page. Unreported gambling winnings going back 3 years. They're claiming he owes $40,000 in back taxes and penalties. The audit notice was dated just 5 days after his arrest. Someone had been thorough in reporting Mark's illegal activities to every relevant government agency. You've been busy, I observed. Robert's smile was slight but satisfied. Former teacher, remember? I know how to do research. The court summons caught my eye. Mark was scheduled to appear before Judge Patricia Collins next week for sentencing on the domestic violence charges. Given his prior fraud conviction and current probation violation, the prosecutor was recommending 6 months in county jail. He tried to get a job at 3 different construction companies, Robert said, producing employment rejection letters. Background checks killed every application. Who's going to hire someone facing multiple felony charges? The loan shark angle was the most disturbing. Text message printouts showed increasingly threatening communications from numbers listed only as Tony M. and Mike Ice. The amounts mentioned were staggering. $50,000 here, $30,000 there, with interest rates that doubled every month. These people don't mess around, I said, reading one particularly graphic thread about broken kneecaps. That's why he's staying at the shelter. Harder for them to find him there. Robert gathered the papers back into a neat stack. His whole world collapsed in 3 weeks, Jesse. Everything he tried to steal from you is gone. I poured coffee for both of us, noting the irony that this beverage had once been a weapon in my own kitchen. Now it was just coffee again, shared between friends, reviewing the downfall of a man who'd overplayed his hand. What about Emily? Robert's expression grew more serious. That's a separate story entirely, and it's not over yet. Emily's story unfolded differently than Mark's, but with equal devastation. While he faced financial ruin, she confronted the complete destruction of every relationship she'd ever valued. The domestic battery charge carried serious consequences in Cook County. Judge Martinez had been clear during Emily's arraignment. 18 months probation, mandatory anger management classes, and a permanent restraining order preventing any contact with me. She violated the restraining order twice in the first week, Robert told me over lunch at a diner downtown. Showed up at your house both times while you were at the grocery store. Neighbors called it in. I sat down my sandwich, appetite suddenly gone. What did she want? According to the police report, she was trying to get inside. Said she'd left important documents in her old room. Robert consulted his notebook. He'd become meticulous about tracking the legal proceedings. Second time, she was just sitting on your front porch crying. Each violation had resulted in additional court appearances, more fines, and extended probation terms. Emily was learning that consequences accumulated, like compound interest, building pressure with each poor decision. The job situation was particularly harsh. Her retail manager position had evaporated within hours of her arrest photo appearing in the local paper. No one wanted to employ someone convicted of domestic violence, especially in customer service roles. She's staying at the women's shelter on Madison, Robert continued. Lost the apartment she shared with Mark when the lease expired. Landlord refused to renew after the police visits. The divorce proceedings had become nasty quickly. Mark blamed Emily for involving the police, while she blamed him for creating the debt crisis that started everything. Their lawyer was withdrawing from the case due to non-payment of legal fees. She tried calling you 17 times last Tuesday, Robert said, showing me a printout he'd somehow obtained. Left 9 voicemails before the system stopped accepting them. I hadn't listened to a single message. The phone company had helped me block her number after the first dozen calls, but Emily kept trying from different phones, the shelter's landline, borrowed cell phones, even payphones downtown. She sent you this. Robert pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. Came to my address yesterday. Figured she knew you wouldn't open anything from her directly. The letter was 3 pages long, handwritten in Emily's careful script. I read the first paragraph before folding it back up. She wants another chance, I said simply. What are you going to do? I looked out the diner window at the pedestrians passing by. Ordinary people going about their daily lives without the drama of family betrayal weighing them down. Nothing. She made her choice 4 years ago when she chose Mark over basic decency. The anger management counselor says she's making progress, Robert offered. Court reports show perfect attendance, active participation. Good for her. I signaled the waitress for our check. Maybe she'll learn something useful for her next family. Robert studied my face carefully. You're really done with her? She threw scalding coffee at me to defend a man who was stealing my life savings. I counted out bills for lunch, my movements deliberate and final. Some bridges can't be rebuilt once they're burned. The drive home was quiet, both of us processing the weight of permanent family separation. As we pulled into my driveway, I noticed a small bouquet of flowers tucked against my front door. Daisies and baby's breath, the kind Emily used to pick from my garden as a child. She was here again, Robert observed. I collected the flowers and dropped them directly into the garbage can beside my porch. Let me know if she contacts you again. I'll have my lawyer send another cease and desist letter. Inside my house, the afternoon light streamed through clean windows onto furniture I'd rearranged to suit my preferences rather than accommodate unwanted guests. For the first time in 4 years, my home felt truly mine again. The phone rang as I was making tea. Unknown number. Probably Emily calling from another borrowed phone. I let it ring. 1 month after the morning that changed everything, I sat in my kitchen with coffee and the newspaper, finally able to enjoy both without fear of interruption. The November light was different now, softer, more golden, casting familiar shadows across the table where Emily had tried to destroy my life with forged documents. The locksmith had done excellent work. New deadbolts, reinforced door frames, a security system that chimed whenever someone approached the house. These weren't paranoid. Precautions. They were practical safeguards against people who'd already proven their willingness to cross any boundary. My phone rang, and I answered without hesitation. The caller ID showed a number I'd been expecting. Jessie, it's Margaret from Food and Travel magazine. Ready to get back to work? More than ready. I swiveled my chair toward the window that overlooked my restored garden. What do you have for me? Portland's got 3 new restaurants the readers are asking about. Vietnamese fusion, farm to table, and something called deconstructed comfort food. Interested? Send me the details. I pulled up my calendar application, noting with satisfaction how empty it was of family obligations and manufactured crisis. I can fly out next week. For 30 years, I'd maintained 2 lives with careful precision. Jessie Fisher, the retired mechanic, was the persona my family knew. Modest pension, simple tastes, someone who needed their help and financial support. But Jessie Fisher, the restaurant critic, was entirely different. Well-traveled, financially independent, with a reputation built on honest reviews and exacting standards. The deception had been necessary. Emily's mother had always resented my frequent travel, suspicious that reviewing restaurants was somehow less legitimate than fixing engines. After her death, I kept the secret partly from self-protection, sensing even then that Emily's relationship with money was complicated. How long has it been since your last review? Margaret asked. 4 months. I scrolled through my hidden files, past reviews of establishments in Seattle, Denver. I took some personal time to deal with family issues. Well, those issues seemed to have resolved themselves. She had no idea how completely accurate that statement was. After we hung up, I walked through my house, noting the changes that had accumulated over the past month. The garage was organized again, my tools in their proper places after being scattered by Mark's territorial claims. The spare bedroom had been stripped of all traces of unwanted occupants. Fresh paint, new bedding. My computer desk returned to its position by the window in my home office, hidden behind a false panel I'd installed years ago. My professional files waited in perfect order, press credentials, expense reports, correspondence with editors at a dozen major publications. The work that had quietly funded my comfortable retirement while my family assumed I was struggling on a mechanic's pension. Robert knocked on the back door, carrying a bottle of wine and wearing the satisfied expression of someone bearing good news. Final court date was today, he announced, settling into his usual chair. Mark got 8 months in county. Emily got 2 years probation plus restitution. How much restitution? $15,000 for the documented damages, plus court costs. Robert opened the wine with practiced efficiency. She'll be paying you monthly for the next 5 years. I accepted a glass, considering the irony. The daughter who tried to steal my house would now be sending me checks every month. A regular reminder of her betrayal converted into practical compensation. To justice, Robert proposed, raising his glass. To peace, I countered. Outside my kitchen window, the garden showed the first signs of my restoration efforts. New plantings where Emily had once helped me weed. Fresh mulch around the roses my wife had loved. The physical space was healing along with everything else. My phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. Flight details attached. Portland awaits your expert opinion. For the first time in months, I smiled without reservation. The woman who tried to destroy my life was facing consequences. The man who tried to steal my home was in jail. And Jesse Fisher, both versions of him, was finally free to live authentically. Tomorrow, I'd book that flight to Portland. Tonight, I'd plan my route through the city's most promising restaurants, my appetite for good food and honest work fully restored. The house settled around me with the comfortable sounds of home, the refrigerator humming, the heat clicking on, the grandfather clock marking time that belonged entirely to me. Perfect. This journey, from heartbreaking betrayal to profound freedom, taught me more about family, trust, and self-worth than I ever imagined. It was a brutal awakening, but it led me to reclaim my life, piece by painful piece. What would you have done if your own family had betrayed you this deeply? Could you have found the strength to call the police on your own daughter? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I really want to hear what you think.